Khazar's Legion is an empire built on conquest. The result of 86 tribes stripped of their identity and forced to become a single conglomerate, with only the most useful traits surviving. The member tribes of this legion each have their own long histories, even if their new masters would rather have these histories be forgotten. The Legion can trace its origin back to 8 tribes that existed around the Grand Canyon. Edward Sallow and Bill Calhoun, 2 members of the Followers of the Apocalypse, and Joshua Graham, a Mormon missionary, had traveled east to study the languages spoken by the tribals of Arizona. While traveling, though, the trio was captured by the Blackfoot, one of the tribes they had come to study. While they shared their name with an Old World confederation of Native Americans, the new Blackfoot shared no ancestry with them. Formed from a group of military survivors in the direct aftermath of the war, the soldiers used their knowledge of weapons to run a protection racket, extorting caps from the farmers of Arizona. As generations passed, the gang would grow as they took in the farmers they extorted and traveling outsiders, but they would slowly lose their knowledge of agriculture and firearm repair, making them just like any other tribal raiding group. When the followers were captured, the Blackfoot were at war with 7 other tribes in the area and, being drastically outnumbered, stood no chance at survival. Edward, not wishing to die with the Blackfoot, taught them the tactics used by Julius Caesar himself in the Gallic Wars. First, he led the tribals in destroying the Ridgers, the weakest of their enemies. Emboldened by their victory, Edward led the Blackfoot in conquering the Kaibabs, and then the Fredosians, and every other tribe in the area. With these tribes under his control, Edward systematically stripped those he conquered of their tribal identity, forming them into a single, homogeneous legion, with him as its Khazar. Over the next 30 years, Khazar and Joshua Graham, now named as the Malpais Legate, would conquer the tribes of Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado, integrating them into the Legion. One of the earliest tribes to be assimilated were the Twisted Hares. While some rumors place them as far east as the Alamo, more reliable sources place the tribe in the ruins of Arizona. Distinguished by their ritualistic dreadlocks, the Twisted Hares initially had an alliance with the Legion, helping them conquer the other tribes of the Copper State, such as the Painted Rocks and the Sundogs. Once Arizona was completely under the Legion's banner, the Twisted Hares were rewarded with the same fate they had afforded so many others: assimilation at the point of a sword. Some members of the tribe would accept their fate and give their services to Khazar. Those who resisted would be crucified along I-40. There are whispers, however, of a single dissident survivor who managed to escape the Legion's wrath. A woman now known as Hecate has formed her own tribe, the Daughters of Hecate, who travel the wasteland and take control of the local tribes, deciding who may and may not have children. The daughters take the strongest of these children for themselves, making the girls into daughters, and the boys into the tribe's warriors, the Hounds of Hecate. One day, Hecate hopes to grow strong enough and take her ultimate revenge on the Legion. The Malpais Legate would even travel to Utah himself to scout out a potential new tribe to recruit. The Dead Horses of Dead Horse Point trace their lineage back to the pre-war Navajo Nation and European tourists vacationing in America when the bombs fell. In 2277, the Legate would visit Dead Horse Point, evaluating the tribe's potential as a new member of the Legion. The tribe grew revenant of the Legate, and they would have been assimilated if Graham weren't called away to lead the Legion against the new California Republic in the First Battle of Hoover Dam. After the Legion's loss at the dam, the Malpais legate was killed for his failure, and a new legate was needed. A perfect candidate came from the Hidebarks tribe. When the Legion surrounded the Hidebarks camp, the chief of the tribe chose to surrender, enraging one of the younger members. The younger man immediately killed the tribe's chief and over a dozen other members of his own tribe before he could be subdued. Impressed with the man's prowess, Caesar himself offered the man a place at his side. The man demanded he be allowed to kill every surviving man of his tribe as compensation. Caesar allowed the adult men to be killed, and Legate Lanius was born. Lanius would lead the Legion in many conquests. Of note were the Hangdogs of Dogtown, formerly known as Denver. Since the war, Denver had become home to roaming packs of wild mongrels. The Hangdogs worshipped these dogs and treated them divinely, making them excellent hound masters once they were integrated into the Legion. Another tribe of Colorado conquered by Caesar were the Twin Mothers. Formed from the survivors of Vault 29, a vault whose initial residents were all under the age of 15, the Twin Mothers were ultimately founded by Diana, the brain of a pre-war scientist that acted as the processor to Zach's computer, serving as the administrator of the nursery, an artificial nature reserve. After the Great War, Diana's isolation began to take its toll, and what remained of her humanity began to feel lonely. To remedy this, she aimed the nursery's satellite dishes at Vault 29, taking control of the Vault's computer systems and becoming the remote caregiver of the children there. Over the years, Diana began to present herself as a goddess of nature, and when the children exited the vault, they founded the Twin Mothers in her name. A gentle tribe, the Twin Mothers attempted to live in harmony with nature and those around them. Their peaceful ways would ultimately damn them, however, as their attempts to coexist with their fellow wastelanders would make them easy targets for the Legion. The matriarchal society would be enslaved in mass, the only surviving remnant of the tribe being the bitter drink that the Legion uses as medicine. Even as the Second Battle of Hoover Dam looms, Caesar still seeks to expand his Legion by consuming tribes such as the Great Khans or the Whitelegs. Another tribe descended from Native Americans and European tourists, the Whitelegs gained their name for their practice of painting their bodies, especially their legs, as white as salt. For 200 years, the Whitelegs stayed on the coasts of Utah's Great Salt Lake, kept at bay by the Desert Rangers to the south. But when the Rangers were integrated into the NCR Rangers as part of the Ranger Unification Treaty of 2271, southern Utah was left unprotected and ripe for raiding. The Whitelegs easily claimed the South, but struggled to enforce their rule across such a large area with their primitive technology. If their expansion continued, they would be crushed under their own weight. Opportunity came for the tribe when they were contacted by a messenger of Caesar. On the shores of the Great Salt Lake sat Ogden, an ancestral stronghold of the Mormon faith. Now known as New Canaan, the city continued to have a large population of Mormons even after the war, including Joshua Graham, who returned to his homeland after surviving his execution. Enraged by his former legate's survival, Caesar offered a deal to the Whitelegs: destroy New Canaan and Graham with it, and they would be allowed to integrate into the Legion. The Whitelegs were exhilarated at the chance to join the Legion, perhaps unaware of the full consequences of assimilation. The tribe even began to braid their hair in imitation of Caesar's envoy, who was a former Twisted Hair, an act they thought would endear them to the legionary, but it only had the opposite effect. Still, they completed the task they were set by their benefactors, with the Whiteleg's war chief salt upon wounds, leading them in burning New Canaan to the ground. Graham survived, however, fleeing to Dead Horse Point, into the hands of the tribe that held him in such high regard. Now, Graham has led the Dead Horses to Zion Canyon. Still pursued by the Whitelegs, he intends to stand his ground, destroying this remnant of his past.